Okay, welcome back to our third presentation of the Power Hitters. And I am honored to welcome Dr. Mark Anthony Neal, who will be presenting on Money Don't Matter Tonight, Prince and the Mainstreaming of Black Music in the 1990s. I don't need to say a whole lot more. I am just going to hand the mic over to him. The floor is yours, Brother Mark.
Thank you, Zahir. And, you know, after a long day like this, and particularly these last two presentations from Camila and C. Lee, I don't know what else there is to add to a conversation about diamonds and pearls at this time. It's been a pleasure sitting here listening to these presentations. I felt like I was sitting in church, and if not church, seminary. But I thought it'd be useful, at least for me and my interest in print, to at least put Diamonds and Pearls into a kind of historical and cultural context around Black music in the 80s and the 90s. It has been perhaps long accepted that Prince's music defies generic logic. The most apropos description perhaps might be Minneapolis funk, or even a consideration of Prince as a genre unto itself. To be sure, if one were to peruse the Black music landscape of the early to mid 1980s, Prince can be said to have produced some of the funkiest music, Rick James and Nile Rodgers notwithstanding, whether it be in the context of the music he had his own hands on, including The Time or the satellites like the work of Jam and Lewis, the work they did, for instance, with Cheryl Lynn with Encore, or the SOS Band, Just to Be Good to Me, which I might argue is the most important Black R&B hit of the 1980s. And of course, the work they did with Janet Jackson, or even a figure like Andre Simone, particularly his work with Jody White. The hegemony of Prince's sound within Black music allowed for him to think expansively about his own music. Around the World in a Day, Parade, Another Hole in Your Head, perhaps the most traditional Black radio track from him in that period, and of course, Sign of the Times. Yet on the other side of that seminal sound, Prince found commercial challenges that he hadn't faced in nearly a decade. As a new sound that wed R&B, gospel, and hip hop, New Jack Swing, and the encroachment of hip hop on mainstream began to take hold, particularly on Black radio, which remained a necessary platform for any commercial Black artist in the period, though increasingly less so for crossover acts like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, and Lionel Ritchie. Prince faced a dilemma. As his music became increasingly inaccessible to the mainstream and simultaneously Black radio, you can hear the ambivalence in some of the music in the late 1980s, like his turn to a single subject soundtrack with Batman, the revisionist Graffiti Bridge, and Lovesexy, in which the lead single Alphabet Stream seemed a concession to the ABC rhyme schemes of rap music at the time. Indeed, the most powerful examples of that ambivalence was the shelved Black album, particularly the track Bob George, which seemed to channel the darkness of Philadelphia Schoolie D while offering up a self-critique of Prince, that skinny motherfucker with a high voice, as if Prince was living a multiplicity of identities, which of course he was, or the extended remix of Lovesexy's I Wish You Heaven, where he drops the line, "Take this beat, I don't mind, got plenty others, they're so fine," highlighting both the inexhaustibility of his creativity and his archive. During the days of the so-called Chitlin Circuit, some Black musicians put more of a premium on being on the road than selling records. The latter issue mattered less in an era where artists, Black artists in particular, were challenged by unfair and exploitative record deals that denied them royalties on record sales, and in some cases, publishing. Artists made their money being on the road, and most importantly, being high up on the bill. That's when the money mattered every night. When Prince emerged as a pop star in the 1980s, he did so when the metrics of Black artists had shifted. And they were not just measured on their appeal to Black radio. Indeed, Prince, Michael Jackson, Tina Turner, Lionel Ritchie, Whitney Houston were of a generation of artists expected to commercially outperform rank-and-file R&B acts, but also to match and even outpace the sales of top white performers. Prince's success through the early part of his career, I would argue, was connected to his adeptness at performing Black music on the fringes of mainstream pop tastes. Diamonds and Pearls marks a moment when Prince seemed more invested in presenting Black music in its full and varied context, anticipating shifts in the political context of his music and career, because he was at a point in his career where money didn't matter, or at least didn't matter as much as it did on any given night. So when you think about tracks like Diamonds and Pearl and Cream, as Camila mentioned earlier, which topped the pop charts, he is making music that's perfectly tailored Black music, but for the mainstream. But at the same time, he's producing a track like Get Off, in which he connects himself to a larger lineage of funk music at a time when MC Hammer and Michael Jackson were attempting to double down on their own lineages to that tradition. MC Hammer, in this case, with a cosign for Mr. Brown. But then you also think about a track like Insatiable, and as Camila mentioned earlier, and as we've all talked about, his ability as an artist to create what we would think of as deep, quiet storm recordings. Those kind of songs that got to play from 10 to 2 in any given metropolitan area where there was a Black radio station. In Insatiable, a song in which it was not serviced to pop radio, but only to Black radio. And that part of Prince's career in which he would produce music that remained oblivious to white audiences, right? And so the duality of what it meant to be a Black pop star at the beginning of the 1990s, where you understood intuitively that you had create music that would find a footing on the Hot 100, but at the same time, in order to keep your Black card, for lack of a better way to describe it, produce music that still resonated for Black folks, not simply as Black folks, in terms of Black music, but music that resonated for Black folks in the kind of social and cultural spaces where music mattered. And I'm done with that. I'm looking forward to the next presentation and the Q&A.